I don't know. Let's watch this one.
Uh,
Okay, who's ready to get regime pilled with Dr. Mohommad Marandi? I am. I am. Let's see. So this, for people unaware, Mohommad Marandi, he is I think, professor at some place in Tehran. He usually comes out and he he runs in the circles of I think, like the upper crust of Iran or whatever, and I think he usually has like some sort of like he goes out and talks to people like from the Iranian perspective of like how they're feeling about the war. I would say usually it's all like allowed messaging from the their equivalent of the State Department or whatever. But yeah, let's see what he has to say about the Middle East. This is Mohammed Marandi. Iran will fight until the U.S. is defeated.
the Iranians are going to fight this war until they impose a strategic defeat on the United States under Trump and the Israeli regime. They've already murdered Ayatollah Khamenei, and his martyrdom has not changed anything, nor has the martyrdom of the commanders that were martyred alongside him. What I actually think is more important and shows that the Titanic is sinking is the fact that Joe Kent has resigned, and he has
Oh yeah.
basically admitted as a Trump appointee that it is the Israeli lobby and the Israeli regime that has imposed this war of aggression.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but he's just like an example or whatever. The majority of Americans already thought that or whatever. So he's just one of the few in the administration was who agreed with the majority of Americans, but also was willing to actually step down. And now he's actually being targeted by the FBI for people who are curious, which I mean was probably obvious that that was going to happen. But all of the people that the Trump administration has been trying to target, uh, the charges end up getting dropped eventually. So he'll probably be fine.
Despite the fact that Iran was no threat to the United States. I think that this in the coming days is going to make things more difficult for the Trump regime, especially since on the battlefield he's failed. The Iranians are pounding with missiles and drones the Israeli regime and U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf region, and the Iranians will not allow the United States to control the Strait of Hormuz.
You have said that Iran is preparing for a much, much longer conflict, that this could go up to and past the midterm elections, which are scheduled to take
Hmm.
place in the United States in
Yeah,
November.
that's what I've been saying too. I don't know if he was the original source of that, but I had been hearing the same thing from the Iranian side.
What more can you tell us about that?
Well, we have to keep in mind that Iran has prepared itself for this war for 25 years, ever since the United States invaded Afghanistan and Iraq and surrounded Iran and started calling Iran an axis of evil and talking about all options are being on the table. Iran began to develop these underground bases for missiles and drones and develop its own indigenous technology for making drones and missiles. And the factories are underground, and many of the bases are not even touched yet. So the Iranians are fully prepared
Yeah.
to continue fighting for a very,
Well,
very
and that's why I say that they're still producing as we speak. Like they are still producing drones, they are still producing missiles, and they can outproduce us. America's bloated military industrial complex can produce like 100 missile interceptors a year or something. Like I, they can they can build like thousands of drones per year, even under sanctions and probably even under wartime.
long time, into next year, in fact. But I think that the United States completely misread the situation. They misread Iran's will, they've misread Iran's capabilities, and now Trump is paying the price. The delusional statements that Trump was making yesterday, I think, and all the inconsistencies and the contradictions in his statements, I think, reflect that.
You say that Iran's goal is to deal the United States and Israel a strategic defeat. What are the bottom line conditions that Iran has for there to be a cessation of hostilities?
The security of Iran and its regional allies must be something that is recognized. Iran must know, and its allies must no longer feel threatened in the years ahead. When the Israelis carried out their blitzkrieg attack 8-9 months ago, we defeated them, and after 12 days, there was a halt in hostility. They wanted the ceasefire, yet they regrouped and they attacked again. We're not going to accept that anymore.
President Trump said in the White House yesterday that...
Yeah, that's probably the best answer. I still wish that they would be a little bit more explicit about Palestine and all this. I know he usually talks about defending the Palestinian people or whatever to some extent. But I would love if like they could add, it might be too much or whatever, but add that as a condition to ending the hostilities is a complete and total peace with the Palestinian people or whatever for Israel.
He was not told by any of his myriad advisors that Iran may adopt a strategy which some called asymmetric warfare and close that vital Strait of Hormuz through which, as I pointed out earlier, 20% of the world's oil supplies pass. There are other very important commodities that pass through as well, through there as well. Are you surprised that he wasn't told about that?
Either he's lying, or it just shows how ignorant and arrogant the political establishment in the United States is.
Or how stupid.
I think you and I have spoken over the years. I've probably said this repeatedly on your show over the years, and I've said it many, many times, countless times on different programs. And everything that I said turned out to be true. And I'm not a genius. It is clear that this is what Iran was going to do. So either the United States is utterly ignorant, and it has much less intelligence.
They've been saying it forever. I think that Trump just didn't think that they would actually go through with it. And because he loves to just gamble. He loves to use America's like power projection or like how big their army is as like a way to just keep on gambling over and over again. He just like never thought anybody like that strategy would ever fail, when the truth is that strategy was like inevitably gonna fail. The more you used it, like it kept getting more and more likely to fail. And so, this time it just failed.
Intelligence than they claim, or they're just lying, and they underestimated Iran's capabilities, which is
a little bit both.
Also a sign of ignorance. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look good for Trump, U.S. intelligence, or the United States.
We've already seen the impact of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices are now over $100 a barrel. We've seen the volatility on stock markets around the world. Now, Iran has added pressure on the United States by declaring that it will allow some supplies, some commodities, including oil, to pass through the strait as long as it is paid for in Chinese yuan. Explain that condition and how it fits into Iran's broader strategy.
I don't know the details, but what I can say is that Iran is closing the Strait of Hormuz, yet allowing the assets of regimes in the Persian Gulf, the Qatar and the Emirates and the Saudis and Kuwait and Bahrain, to remain intact for the most part. Why? Even though they are fully complicit in this war, those U.S. bases were used on their territory to kill Iranians. They can't pretend they're neutral. They're not. And there's even talk that some of them actually encouraged the U.S. to attack Iran, and those have not been denied. But Iran has kept it close. And
I don't think it actually happened. I think that that's some propaganda from America's perspective of saying that Saudi Arabia was like fully on board or whatever. But I don't think that they actually wanted this to happen, because I think that to some extent they knew Iran's capabilities a little bit more than America did.
Preserve their assets because Iran does not want the global economy to be destroyed. Iran wants the United States to back off, and regions and regimes in this region to end this occupation, U.S. occupation of their territory. So if the United States backs off, if Iran's demands are met, reparations are given, Iran's allies have security, then it will be business as usual. But if the United States escalates, since those regimes are all complicit, then their assets will be destroyed. If the war intensifies, then everything will be destroyed, and that will create a permanent crisis and bring down the global economy. So Iran is preventing a crisis.
I think we're already kind of in that territory at this point. I don't know if there's going to be any recovery anytime soon. I think that Iran will probably just keep hitting more oil locations as theirs are hit or whatever, if they keep getting hit. Um and I also think that we're probably going to see troops on the ground, or boots on the ground at some point, which will then escalate into a full-fledged occupation. I don't know for sure if that's going to happen, but I kind of have that's like what I'm leaning towards right now.
By shutting the Strait of Hormuz, to put pressure on the United States and have the international community put pressure on the United States and its regional proxies that are allowing it to attack Iran from their territory, so that this would come to an end.
As far as the United States Persian Gulf allies, these Gulf states that we've been talking about, is it also a condition of the Iranians that the U.S. bases in these Persian Gulf states be closed, and be closed permanently?
There's no doubt that Iran will no longer allow regimes in the Persian Gulf to be a platform for aggression against Iran. That era is finished.
Iran is facing attacks now from two nuclear-powered nations, Israel and the United States. Is there fear among Iranians that this could trigger a nuclear attack by either one of these states or both of them?
The very fact that you raise such a question shows how barbaric the two regimes are.
Exactly what I was going to say.
That you could even contemplate such a thing. No sane person would ever use nuclear weapons or even contemplate it. But the fact that you and many others do ask this question show what sort of monsters we're dealing with. Ethno-supremacists, the Epstein class. This is what we're standing up against. And we will continue to resist. We will not allow them to have control over our country.
Yeah, I mean, he's completely right. The fact that like people even think that that's a possibility, like I personally don't think the United States will, but I think that Israel might. But it's because they're like fascists, like they're Nazis, like they're the same as Hitler's Nazis or whatever. Like Hitler and the Nazis didn't become less brutal and less expansionist as they became weaker, right? They became more brutal and more expansionist as they became weaker. And so Israel is in that same boat. They are getting weaker by the day. Like they are getting weaker by the hour, like politically, I mean. And so as their project, like it's going to reach a fever pitch, right? Where they're, completely, insane, trying to extinguish every Palestinian, every Lebanese person they can find, like going to war with, like it feels like we're kind of already in it, but going to war with every country around them at the same time, constantly trying to like expanding forever. Like they're reaching that fever pitch of like genocidal rage that is to me like potentially uncontrollable. If they did, I don't necessarily know if it would be, I don't necessarily know if it would lead to any sort of like strategic outcome for them, even if they did decide to go through with using a nuke. I personally think that like, I don't necessarily think it would, because I would assume that at that point, Pakistan or somebody would just give Iran a nuke, and maybe they wouldn't use it, but they would say, hey, we're a nuclear armed nation now. If you ever do that shit again, then you're gonna be blasted off the face of the earth. So like I don't know. But this is all kind of make believe. Like I don't know where like I just think that Israel is the most likely out of these people to actually do it. America, while they are genocidal, they're not in the same sort of like messianic rage that Israel has or whatever.
or to dominate our region. That's over. But yet, the question should be asked, if they do seriously contemplate a nuclear weapon, what would then happen? First of all, Iran, of course, would have to move towards, it would have to change its nuclear policy. But would it only be Iran? Or would countries across the region and across the world come to this conclusion that we all have to have nuclear
Everybody
weapons?
get a nuke.
And in the era of AI and the new technologies, nuclear weapons are not that far off to access for any country. So I think that if they seriously contemplate using such
Well,
weapons,
it's also like they don't have to develop it necessarily. You know what I'm saying? Like people seem to think that like if they got nuked or something, that then Iran would have to then go through the entire process of developing a nuke. No, they could just get a nuke from somebody. They could get a nuke from Pakistan. They could get a nuke from China. Like the, they don't have to like developing it isn't the only way to achieve a nuke. And so but I mean, he's talking about like I've given up, man. Nuclear proliferate, like everybody get a nuke to each nation state, one nuke, have it evenly distributed across everybody, and then maybe nobody will fuck with each other. I don't know. At this point, it seems like the only option to keep the belligerence of America and Israel at bay.
they would bring destruction upon themselves. The world will not accept it. But also it will lead to a situation where everyone has nuclear weapons. And then I think that will bring the world to a very, very dangerous place.
Looking at the consequences and the impact of this conflict, I want to play you a comment that was made by Tom Fletcher. He is at the United Nations. He's responsible for humanitarian affairs and emergency aid. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
On the Straits of Hormuz, I'm really worried about food costs, energy costs, as you say, fertilizer costs. I'm worried that actually further escalation will damage other supply routes. All of this has a direct impact on our humanitarian supplies, including going to areas of key need in sub-Saharan Africa.
So how concerned is Iran that this block of the Strait of Hormuz is going to affect fertilizer shipments as well as oil shipments? And as far as fertilizer shipments are concerned, it will in turn affect food harvests, especially.
I'm just gonna go use the bathroom real quick. I'm gonna let this play though.
In the developing world, in the global south.
It is of great concern, and that is why the UN should condemn the United States for this war of aggression. Has it? The UN should condemn the Israeli regime for this war of aggression. Has it done that? The UN should condemn those countries in the region that have allowed the United States to use their bases to murder Iranian children. Yesterday, a 3-day-old boy was murdered in a village. They bombed a village, and his 2-year-old sister died with him. So I think that if the United Nations is really worried about the children of the world, they should start worrying about the children of Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, first and foremost. And if they did that, then I think that would help force the United States to back down. And if that happens, then the Strait of Hormuz will go back to normal.
What can you tell us about conditions in Tehran right now? I mean, how are people coping with and responding to these attacks by the United States and Israel?
It's difficult because they carpet bomb the city. They murder people. And they don't care. And Western media presents a very warped view of reality. One would not imagine, if one watches Western media or reads Western media, whether it's Trump supporters or Trump's opponents, that this was unprovoked aggression.
Yeah, Western media is a joke. It's completely sycophantic to war. It's becoming less and less relevant, though, I think, generally. He's right that, like, no matter where you go in our media, there's always going to be warmongers trying to get people on board for the war. But because we've seen this playbook so many times, and even, like, American, like, our American, homegrown American stupids or whatever, even they don't really find like even they don't really buy all the same arguments that like happened with Iraq anymore. Which is a good thing, right? It shows that we've learned at least a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. Yeah, I fucking hate our media, to be honest. Like I still rely on it to some extent to do my commentary, uh it's just the the average position of our media is just like so hateful and so genocidal and so like warmongering.
They hid the fact that that school with 180 little girls murdered, they hid the fact that the United States did it for a whole week. And only after a week, when everyone online was talking about it, did the New York Times feel forced to do something, probably out of spite for Trump. But Western media is so completely silent about the atrocities that we're experiencing today. So it is difficult, but people are steadfast. Every night, and I'm sure you've seen this, every night people go on the streets across the country and across Tehran to support the armed forces, to support the Constitution and the state. And then during some of these gatherings, the Americans and Israelis fire missiles at them. On Friday, I attended one during the day. Last Friday, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people had gathered in Tehran, and they fired missiles at the protesters who were protesting this aggression. And yet I didn't see it anywhere in
That's just an average Thursday in American foreign policy nowadays.
Western media. And a woman was murdered. The missile killed one of the women in the protest. This is a world that we
That's
live in.
sad. Yeah. Whoops.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's very sad. Sorry, let me go back to here just so that
The
I
Iranians
can.
are
Iranian people, obviously you don't have to listen to me. I'm just, a little white boy from the Midwest. But I want you to know that I feel for you. I don't, I don't like what my government's doing. Um, I'm doing my best out here. I'm doing my best to try to convince my fellow Amerifats to to stop supporting this war. I think at least to some extent, take heed in the fact that like the average person in America does not want to be in this war. The problem is that the MAGA coalition, the MAGA base, is like 100% on board for it, or at least like 90% on board for it. And so, you know, hopefully one day we'll wrestle power in whatever way we have to from Trump and the MAGA freaks or whatever who want to keep it going. But at some point they'll probably start to lose interest and want this to stop as well. But you know what? Stay steadfast. I believe in you. Thank you, Mohommad Marandi, for giving us some good info from a different perspective.